Please welcome President Bill Clinton.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, we're nearly done. But I have to ask your indulgence because we have a really great closing group of people. But a lot of them are on a very tight time schedule, so I have been appropriately gagged, and so must you be. I'd like to ask to the stage what we call the Ukraine cluster. James Gordon, the Center for Mind and Body, Mike Sawney of Pleverto, Charles Hooker of Keystone Human Services, Olga Rudneva of Superhuman Centers, Margaret Benor of Ariadne Labs, Mary Ellen Iskandarian of Women's World Banking, Slava Baalbek of the Baalbek Bureau, Kevin Hsu of MEBO International, and Stephen Smith of Airlink. When I talked with President Zelensky earlier today, and I asked him what he wanted us to do, we non-governmental, non-weapons-toting crowd, and he said something, and so help me God, all these commitments had been made before he said what he did, but it looks like we were taking his marching orders. Since February, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has led 17.7 million people, more than a third of the population, in need of humanitarian aid inside the country's borders, and another 7 million having sought refuge in other countries. Civilian casualties include the confirmed death and injuries of over 10,000 people, but we know there are many more. Hundreds of residential buildings have been damaged and destroyed. Critical infrastructure like health facilities and electrical grids have been badly damaged and will lead to more civilian suffering. The physical and emotional health impacts of living in areas directly experiencing armed conflicts, as we all know, are extraordinary. Since the beginning of the crisis, many of Ukraine's neighbors and other countries around the world have opened their doors to Ukrainian refugees. But the burden on host countries, particularly those bordering Ukraine, is also large. And they face enormous challenges in meeting refugees' medical, housing, financial, and educational needs, in addition to their own pre-existing economic challenges. Today, I'm glad to announce several commitments that directly focus on the urgent needs and physical well-being of Ukrainians, both within Ukraine and in host countries. And I will just go through the list here. Superhumans Ukraine will raise funds to refurbish the Veterans Hospital in the city of Lviv into a rehabilitation center for adult and child victims of violence. The government has contributed the hospital space. Superhumans will reconstruct it, provide equipment, and offer training programs for Ukrainian medical personnel. The primary focus of this public-private partnership will be on providing prosthetics, facial reconstruction, and psychological support to civilians and veterans alike. Baalbek will work to improve the quality of temporary housing for citizens internally displaced in Ukraine. As emergency shelters are not designed for long-term habitation, temporary housing is increasingly needed to meet basic needs as well as to provide comfort. Baalbek will develop dignified housing that enhances community cohesion and offers access to schools, stores, and places of worship. MEBO, known globally for regenerative technology, will provide virtual trainings throughout Europe focused on burn, ulcer, and wound management. MEBO will also provide medical resources and equipment support to improve preparedness for emergencies and disasters. Ukraine will be the first location served by this commitment. The Center for Mind-Body Medicine will address the physical and psychological symptoms of trauma experienced by Ukrainians and their struggle to survive. The center will train clinicians, educators, clergy, and others in proven trauma healing programs and help to build resilience to trauma that certainly lie ahead. Keystone Human Services will work in Moldova to address the immediate and longer-term needs of Ukrainian refugees with disabilities, as well as vulnerable individuals from host communities. The effort will provide medicines and medical devices, counseling, accessible shelter, food, and specialized supports through a hotline and mobile teams. And Keystone will also build the capacity of local governments and civil society to conduct inclusive responses. Airlink will partner with several major airlines and regional NGOs to transport relief workers and emergency supplies for medical and mental health care, shelter, food, safe drinking water, hygiene, and sanitation for as long as needed to Ukrainian communities in crisis, as well as to those hosting refugees in surrounding countries. Ariadne Labs will convene educators, medical and public health experts, community trust agents, and digital media leaders to produce educational videos to equip residents in conflict and refugee settings with the knowledge of vital health topics such as how to tie bandages, stop bleeding, and use tourniquets. Women's World Banking will assess the ongoing financial needs of female refugees as they leave home and hopefully return home. They will collect the necessary data to develop financial services to help the population secure housing, access health care, start new businesses, and build resilience. Finally, Social Progress Imperative and Play Verto, in partnership with Deloitte, will launch the Ukraine Refugees People's Pulse, a survey to assess the capacity of host communities to support refugees' needs. Surveys of refugees will offer real-time feedback along with various quality of life criteria to inform governments, businesses, and civil society about how best to manage the refugee crisis. Phase 1 of the Pulse survey will launch across Poland with the hope to expand to other European countries. Together, these commitments will provide urgent relief and healing during the humanitarian crisis. I am very, very grateful to all these members of our CGI community for coming together to support the people of Ukraine and their struggle for freedom and recovery. Let's give them all a big hand. Come on, guys. Let's come up here.
Thank you, President Clinton.
Let's give a big hand to all these folks and now I want to welcome to the stage Nazanin Ash, the CEO of Welcome.us, an organization Hillary and I are proud to serve as co-chairs. Otherwise, you're free to disapprove. No, it's a great group. Come on up, Nazanin.
Hi, everyone. There's so much energy in this room. It's amazing to be with you. What a day. So I'm Nazanin Ash, and Welcome.us launched a little over a year ago in response to a great national challenge, welcoming nearly 100,000 Afghan evacuees on a government resettlement system that in the previous year had welcomed just over 11,000 refugees. It was an overwhelming task for the US government and its traditional government partners. But we knew it was a challenge we could meet if we turned to the whole of America. Working with the US government and resettlement agencies, we dramatically expanded our country's welcoming capacity by inviting everyday Americans and our corporate, civic, and community organizations into the resettlement process. Together, this all-country effort welcomed nearly 80,000 Afghan allies in less than 6 months. It also revealed a beautiful truth about our country. We are a nation of welcomers. When Russia invaded Ukraine just 6 months after the fall of Kabul, the US faced another challenge: how to provide a pathway to safety for thousands of Ukrainians urgently seeking refuge in the United States. It was an impossible task for a government system still responding to the Afghan crisis. So we asked a simple but foundational question: what happens when we reimagine refugee resettlement as a community practice rather than only a government process? We worked with the US government to help design Uniting for Ukraine, a public-private partnership that provides a lifeline to safety for Ukrainians fleeing war, with the support of an American sponsor. What happened next was extraordinary and cause for hope. In just 5 months, Americans signed up to sponsor more refugees than the whole of the US government admitted in the last 5 fiscal years combined. Americans are welcomers. Today, with our commitment, we're expanding on this willingness to welcome. Over the next 3 years, with our partners and with all of you, we will engage 50,000 Americans to help sponsor 100,000 refugees. We will help create a model of resettlement that's nested in our communities, who can best provide the welcome, the sense of belonging that is so essential for the success of our new neighbors. Our new neighbors who come here seeking the same ideals that unite us as Americans: safety, freedom, the right to self-determination. Our mission is to unleash the power and potential of Americans from all corners and all sectors to welcome newcomers, and in doing so, build a nation with the capacity and the commitment to welcome many more. That's what this moment calls on us to do. 100 million globally displaced, 100 million without a home, 100 million unable to fulfill their human potential. We have to do our part. We can and we must do more. And if we engage the whole of our society, we will. Thank you all so much.
Please welcome Anna Marie Argilagos.
Good afternoon. The story of migration is not conceptual for me. It is my own family's winding path, full of grief and gain. Celia Cruz, Domino's, Ropa Vieja, looking for my daughter Alexia's photo in faded photographs from places far, far away. My 18-year-old parents, they left Cuba during the political turmoil of the 1960s. They had just one duffel bag and dreams of one day returning. They landed on the shores of Puerto Rico, where my 3 brothers and I were born. And we stayed there until I was about 6. And then my parents would migrate again, this time to Miami, in search of economic opportunity. Saturday morning cartoons switched. They were now in English. And that is how I learned my second language, with the Flintstones and a bowl of Fruity Pebbles. Generation after generation, people just like my family have found themselves on the move for a variety of different reasons, like we have heard today, often in search of safety, getting away from violence, war, persecution. Other times, in search of economic security, and with the hopes of a better life for their children. But now with climate change and its accompanying fires, floods, storms, extreme temperatures, we have yet another devastating root cause of migration. And that is why Hispanics in Philanthropy's commitment to action today is the Colibri, or the Hummingbird Initiative. And it's a fund at the intersection of climate and migration. Colibri will build a vibrant, thriving ecosystem of support in Latin America, in Mexico, in the Caribbean, and in the United States. There are 2 pillars to this work. First, we're going to convene and connect migrant justice leaders and climate justice leaders. Sounds simple, but it's not happening. They're working in silos. Second, we will move resources, and by resources I mean money. Money is very important, but we also need skills, networking, partnerships, idea sharing, all of that. So we'll be moving that to pro-immigrant and climate justice organizations. Over the past 40 years, Hispanics in Philanthropy has been building, funding, fueling a trusted transnational network all across the Americas. We have established such great networks, and we have redistributed over $80 million to over 800 grantees. Our values call us to put people first, as you've heard over and over here at CGI. We start by listening to those on the ground, those closest to the solutions, and this is what informs everything that we do. And now, with our Colibri initiative, we will be supporting people on the move and the ecosystems that support them. Philanthropists need to wake up and take action because, as you've heard, an average of 21.5 million climate refugees continue to be displaced annually. Just yesterday, the island that I call home was left entirely without power, much of it without water, by Hurricane Fiona. This is very devastating because 5 years ago today, right? Do you guys know what today's anniversary of? It was Hurricane Maria. And that hit, and in the aftermath of Maria, it wiped out most of the infrastructure, left over 4,000 persons dead, and 200,000 people permanently displaced. And so I'm really tired of watching the same news stories over and over again. I'm tired of seeing the same images of people suffering. I know that you are all tired of seeing that as well. And so it's time. Thank you. It's time for us to grow a vibrant, fully resourced, intersectional, intergenerational movement. People like my parents should not be forced to uproot their lives. Let's take action together. Join me, join all of us in making climate justice a reality in our lifetime. Thank you.
As the poet Amanda Gorman wrote, a peak of progress and potential. The Empire State Building, rising out of the very heart of New York City, is now, more than ever, a symbol of that progress and potential. Not just for New York, but for the world. An architectural wonder when it was completed nearly 100 years ago, this icon leads again as one of the most energy-efficient skyscrapers in the world. Following a comprehensive retrofit, the Empire State Building reduced 50% of its carbon emissions, committing to be completely carbon neutral in less than a decade.
Energy efficiency investment creates jobs locally. Healthier buildings create a more productive workplace.
The world's real estate leaders, including the Empire State Realty Trust, recognize the need to decarbonize the industry in an equitable way for people and for the planet.
We just want to demonstrate how we can do this more efficiently.
That's why the Empire State Realty Trust, quite literally, wrote the book on it. A comprehensive playbook on how to retrofit a classic office building like this one in a sustainable and cost-effective way, and is expanding this effort to all of its properties. They are showing we can fight climate change in a way that's good economics, creates jobs, and protects our future.
Now, nobody has an excuse because we got a playbook which shows every building owner exactly how to do it.
This is the power of leadership, shining a light on what works, showing us what's possible, and improving our world. Years of commitment and engagement have created a beacon of progress to inspire the world.
Please welcome Dolores Huerta and Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Well, I have to say that not every speaker gets a standing ovation before she talks. And that's for you, my friend. You are an icon for so many of us, a real model for what activism with purpose that gets results is all about. For the few of you who don't know Dolores, she has devoted her entire life to helping more people live their own better lives and have better futures through her work co-founding the farm workers union movement with Cesar Chavez, all the way up to the present day where she is still actively involved in politics and causes that are near and dear to her heart. You know, Dolores, we started yesterday with Bill talking about we needed to figure out how to do things that would make a difference. You've spent your whole life doing that. What was it that motivated you to be an activist and a problem solver from your very earliest years?
Well, I think I started out as a Girl Scout when I was 8 years old, and you know, and then again, you know, I belonged to many social organizations growing up, but none of them ever changed anything. You know, we kind of did Christmas baskets and Thanksgiving and Christmas and kind of charity work. But when I learned the magic of grassroots community organizing in people's homes, like the Tupperware parties, that's what I relate them to, and then getting people to commit that they can change things, convincing them that they have the power to change things, and making them understand that if they do not engage, if they do not commit to participate in making change, it's never going to happen.
That's right.
That's the secret. That's the secret.
And somebody else fills that space with, you know, actions and ideas that may not at all have anything positive to offer. And because you've been on the front lines and with particular focus on the citizens of the Central Valley of California, and I was privileged with Chelsea to go to the home of one of Dolores's daughters, because she did all of this activism while having 11 children. 6 daughters, and we were privileged to meet 5 of them. One had passed away, and we sat around a table for our docu-series Gutsy, making tamales.
Gutsy women.
Yeah, gutsy women. But in that, in that encounter and so many other of the times that I've been with you, I've always felt that you never looked back. You always lived in the present and kept looking forward. So as we have the ending period here of CGI, what do you want to say to this group of change makers and activists and people who want to do things? What should they be focused on? How should they be thinking about working? Because as you said, if we don't work together, it doesn't get done.
Well, I think one of the issues that we have is that oftentimes we see funders, for instance, they'll fund a program. And like in our foundation, yes, we do have a youth program, but we also have an education program. We also have a program on dealing with the environment. And then at the basis of all of that is just the basic thing of voting. We just did a big campaign on the census, signing up 84,000 people. Then we did the redistricting. We had a demographer, a great demographer, Jesus Garcia, who did the maps. And in California, we have an independent commission. Then we presented the maps, and we got our maps approved. And then we went one step further, because representation and governance is what we're talking about, what we need. So we just got 2 bills signed by Governor Gavin Newsom that we can have independent commissions for the Board of Supervisors and the commissioners, and and for the school boards. All of these places where we need people that are really going to protect people, fight for people on all of those public offices. So I kind of call it Democracy 101. Building from the ground up to make sure that we can elect the people that we need, that are going to have progressive policies, and that are going to make sure that we share the resources so that people, especially poor people, low-income people, marginalized communities, so that they can get their share of what they need to have a better life.
That's so important to remind us that starting and working at the local level really makes a difference. And I remember way back when I was in college, and you were leading the strategy behind the national boycott of grapes, right?
Yes.
And when it started, nobody gave you a chance. They thought, what is this all about? But that was such a lesson in starting with an idea, spreading the idea, and this was long before there was social media. You couldn't go viral. It had to go person to person. Could you talk a little bit about one of that very earliest successful organizing efforts you did?
Well, and actually it goes back again to the basics, like people knew about the grape strike. But before we had that strike, we organized for 3 years in people's homes. And then when we did the boycott, farm workers came out from Delano to New York City to right here in the yellow school bus. And they did the same thing. They went to people's homes. We had chapters in Brooklyn, in Queens, here in Manhattan, everywhere, Westchester, Long Island. And they went to people's homes and they met with them and asked them to support the farm workers. They went to community meetings. They went to the churches and getting everybody involved. But it's a people to people, just convincing people that, and when you think about it, that it was all the people, New York City, Chicago, Texas, everywhere, all of those people that didn't buy grapes, that got the farm workers their union contracts. Isn't that amazing? It was everybody out there in the United States that made it happen.
And sometimes today I think that people too quickly dismiss that very personal interaction that you're talking about, where literally you go into people's homes or their places of worship or other community gathering places in order to connect with them, to relate to them, to make your case to them. And so all these years later, do you still think that's the best way to change hearts and minds?
Well, I think that's one of the ways. Of course, now we have social media where you can have, you can disseminate information. You can mobilize people very quickly. Because the thing is that people throughout the United States did not know what the conditions of farm workers were. But once they knew, they could do something about it. And it was so simple, just saying, don't eat grapes, don't buy grapes. But I think that's what we have to do, because we have a lot, as you know, a lot of misinformation. And people don't really know. And they don't realize, and I'm going to use the F word, okay?
Yeah.
fascism. Because I think that we have seen the face of fascism in our country now, and we realize how dangerous it is, but a lot of people don't know what that is. And Ken Burns just did this a new documentary about the United States and the Holocaust. And I would hope that everybody can see that, to see how we have had fascism in our country, starting with, when you might say the genocide against Native Americans in the United States of America, and the racism that we have had in the United States of America. And the word fascism comes from a German word, to punish. And we see that's happening now. I just came from Texas, where they have passed laws that will criminalize women for the right to have an abortion, and gay and transgender people. And we see that there are laws being passed against them. So this is fascism. And we know that the only way that we can overcome that is through democracy, by having everybody participate.
Well, there is no doubt that, of all the people that I personally know, you have believed that, you have lived that, you have been willing literally to put your life at risk in order to stand up for freedom and democracy and justice. And so as we close our conversation, I want to ask Bill and Chelsea to join me out here, because it's not just me and my family that is a huge admirer of Dolores. It's truly my husband, my daughter, and myself. And it was fascinating when Chelsea and I were with you and your daughters making tamales, how much conversation there was between Chelsea and your daughters about what it's like to have a mother who drags you around to do political and social and civic activities. But I didn't have 11, I only had one. And honestly, I cannot imagine what you did and how you did it, but I am very grateful you did. So if Bill and Chelsea are back there somewhere, if they'll come out and join me, because we have something we want to do, Dolores.
And my daughter Camila's here also back there.
Yeah, yeah. Is your daughter back? One of your daughters?
Yeah, Camila Chavez.
Okay, if she's here, have her come out, because we are so delighted and honored to present Dolores with this year's Clinton Global Citizen Award.
Oh! I had no idea. Oh my gosh.
Okay. We're so proud.
Oh, no, thank you, thank you.
You know, we established this award back in 2007 for people who are groundbreakers, change makers, who really model for us what CGI stands for, bringing people together, doing the hard, sometimes slow and frustrating work of bringing about positive change. And we are so thrilled that we're together in person again so that we can honor our friend and one of our great American leaders. Thank you, my friend.
Oh, oh my God, thank you so much. What a surprise, what a surprise.
We surprised you, didn't we? We surprised
Yes, you did, yes, you did. I had no idea.
Thank
Thank
you all.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, thank you.
I'm Andrea Escobar from Soy Doy. Our mission is to empower communities in Colombia in their food security through nutritional education and income generation training. Taking action together is the only way to achieve major social impact and systems change. That's why we are making a commitment to action to support 1,350 families in their food security with our Nutri Entrepreneurship model. Through collaborative work with them and our partners, we aim to transform food systems while decreasing malnutrition and increasing food access and awareness about the importance of nutrition in daily health. Join us.
And now, please welcome Bono, Karen Hayden Miga, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, and President Bill Clinton.
Well, I keep having to remember I don't have to pick up a mic anymore. First, I want to thank all of these people for being here. We're supposed to cram all this into 20 minutes, and we could easily spend 2 or 3 hours with every one of them, but we'll begin. Let me begin with Dr. Tedros. And a disclosure, we met when he was the health minister of Ethiopia, in a country that had 80 million people and 60-something% of them lived in villages. There were 60,000 villages of 1,000 or less. They had a grand total of 800 clinics for 60,000 villages. So he had this idea that we would get everybody within a walk of a clinic. And we had to build, as I recall, maybe 6,000, something like that, to be within a day's walk. And then 12 to 15,000 to get within 4 hours walk. And he set off on that and got me set off on that. And we've been friends ever since. I was thrilled when he became head of the World Health Organization. When I met him and I got home, I said, if I were still president, I would be honored if this man were the head of the Center for Disease Control, the NIH, the Secretary of Health and Human Services. He's a great public servant. And his family's been through hell in Ethiopia, and he still shows up for work. So, let me ask you a question with your WHO hat on. We're into the cold and flu season in the Northern Hemisphere. Is it fair to say that the COVID challenge has been transformed from a pandemic to just one that's always going to hang around and we manage it like the flu?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you. I would like to use this opportunity to thank you for all the support when I was Minister of Health and all the reform that we have done together. And not only that, I remember the first cohort of people for HIV treatment actually started with your support. So thank you for that. But I will tell you one thing maybe you didn't know. During my first campaign for WHO as for the DG position in 2017, I used what you said. President Clinton said you could be the Secretary of Health for the US.
I did.
So I used you. Then coming to our situation, as you know, this pandemic has been really tragic and unprecedented. Of course, the official is more than 6 million deaths, but from our assessment, WHO's recent assessment, the number of deaths could be more than 18 million. And that's very, very tragic. And of course, you know the number of cases, more than 600 million, which is underreporting. Probably the number of cases of COVID must be much, much higher. But now we are at a very good position, significantly different. If I give you figures in March 2020, mid-March, we had 2,000 deaths per week. Then in 1 week, the end of March, it increased to more than 8,000 per week. But now, as we speak, that's the lowest when it was starting. Now, as we speak, weekly it's around 8,000 deaths per week. I'm not saying it's small, but if you see where we were and where we are now, I think there is a significant progress. And that's why I said a couple of weeks ago, the end is in sight. We're, living to live. We're understanding to live with the virus, and it's becoming manageable. But that doesn't mean there is no risk, because new variants may emerge, and there could be other factors because of the not using the countermeasures we have properly. We may face a spike, but I don't think we will have, the serious problems like mid-2020 or in 2021, and even the last months of 2021. So we're in a better condition, and the virus is now behaving when, as all pandemics, going to a lowest level, and hope if that continues, we will be in a better position. But surely we're in a significantly better position, and the end is in sight. But it doesn't mean that it's over. It's not over. We have to continue to use the tools we have, especially protect the elderly with vaccines, and people with comorbidity, and our health workers. If we do that, I think the end is in sight.
Well, one of the things that has been a constant concern to people who work on all kinds of other health challenges, obviously in the developing world, is that the resources taken to fight COVID, including by donor nations in their own countries, but also elsewhere in the world, would basically cripple what we still have to do. And we may want to come back to that before we close, but I'll move to Bono, because he's been very active in supporting the attempt to replenish the funding of the Global Fund on AIDS, TB, and Malaria. And it's really important. I mean, we've actually lost some ground in the AIDS fight in the last couple of years because we had to deal with other things. But there are some gaps we have to now fill in the TB effort. There are all these things that are out there. So, Bono, what's your take on this? How are we doing in maintaining support for the Global Fund and the fight against HIV? And do you think we're going to manage it? It looked to me like we had a global epidemic and then an epidemic of intense nationalism in our politics, and the two things didn't work very well together, and we're still paying for it a little bit.
Well, might I say, storytelling plays its role. Our politics is often hostage to our storytelling, and might I say how great it is to have a great storyteller back in that seat, our explainer in chief here.
Thank you.
Top line melody man, if a singer can say that to a saxophone player. But our ability to tell the story is critical, and the Global Fund is a success story. It's kind of the best kept secret in some sense. So that's where RED comes in, and the One campaign comes in. We need campaigners, but we also need to reach out to companies, and I need to do better as a storyteller. I arrived here, I might tell you, in a Jeep Compass made by Chrysler and made by AIDS activists and part of the RED campaign. If you work in Chrysler, if you work in Stellantis, you're an AIDS activist. And I have, my RED phone, which puts, this is, Apple, are like, if you work at Apple, you're an AIDS activist. And if you buy, you know, through Bank of America, either of those products, in fact, even if you don't buy either of those products, you're still an AIDS activist. Because Bank of America are part of this story. And I would go further and say this. You, sir, were part of the negotiating of the prices of antiretroviral drugs down to a place where the rural poor could afford them. The United States, you led on this. President Bush spent $18 billion. President Obama continued, which, you know, presidents don't often do. If they don't start something, he followed through. I think he was at 52 million. On the way to 110 million. It's the largest health intervention in the history of medicine to fight a single disease, led by the United States of America. So if you're an American, you're an AIDS activist. And I love saying that. Love saying that. But how do we continue? There's also something about the moment we're in, and you mentioned nationalism and populism, and you mentioned, you know, the geometry of the conversation between rich and poor worlds has changed by the coronavirus, by the climate crisis, and by nationalism. And I think it's clear now that the old relationships that we used to call donor and recipient, it's over. It's over, and I'm glad they're over. And we are now clearly mutually dependent on each other. And so I think there's a new mood around the Clinton Global Initiative that I'm picking up. A new mood as we go into the Global Fund negotiations and the replenishment conference. But we must not take it for granted. And we need everyone coming through. We're hearing, you know, President Macron did an amazing job 3 years ago. 6 years ago, Prime Minister Trudeau did an incredible job. And it's literally the last 24 hours on the phones, making those deals. President Biden has got $6 billion on the table tomorrow, if the rest of the world matches it. And, you know, we're on our tenterhooks. The UK, you know, are not pledging this week. We hear because they're in mourning, and we're sad with them, and that they are in mourning. And, you know, the Irish have a complicated relationship with royalty. But I will say this, that, you know, what we know of Queen Elizabeth II is that if she had an appointment to keep, she kept it. And we miss that. We will miss that. And I'm sure that the values that she espoused and epitomized, we will need them tomorrow. And we will need our friends in the UK to be with us tomorrow. And our hearts go out to them, and their checkbooks must come out to us.
Well, yeah, when you said that about the Queen, I was thinking about how she gamely shook hands with Martin McGuinness.
Yeah. That's the thing that people forget. And this is one of the only disagreements that we had with the president, and my personal disagreements, not a country one, but the president wanted to know how would it be if he was to speak to Martin McGuinness and Gerry Adams, and he was asking his friends, just privately in Ireland, you know, what would that be to get them visas? It was a very big risk, would upset actually the British. And I said I wouldn't give them the visa. I just felt a very, I didn't know that they were so serious for peace, and you did, and you were right, and our country is very grateful that you were.
Thank you. Dr. Miga, you know, I had more than a passing interest in your lifelong passion to sequence the human genome and to make it all public, but I think that I spent $3 billion of American tax money to finish it. And we thought we'd finish more than we had. And then she and her remarkable team proved that we had left a lot of things out. So from a layman's point of view, can you briefly explain what it was you added to complete the sequencing of the genome? And then, can you say what it means for all these things we're talking about? Why is it, what are the implications for this for lengthening life, democratizing the reach of health care? Where are we going with all this when all of us poor people who aren't as smart as you are have to figure out what to do with what you found out? How do we make the most of it?
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to really emphasize that the Human Genome Project was a landmark achievement, and it has been a sea-level change. It has just been foundational for new scientific discoveries, for technology and innovation, and has really launched an era of new genomic medicine. With that being said, when we think about human genomes, we think about the instructions for cells, the instructions for life. People have thought about this as being the book of life. And what I want to express to everyone in the room on behalf of our team is that that book was missing a chapter. About 8%, 200 million bases, were missing for about 2 decades. And important information was in that final chapter. Information that can tell us more about our human histories, information that can help improve human health care, and information that tells us how the cell works at a very fundamental level. Now, when you ask me what sequences were in that 8%, I'll tell you that they were called repeats. So if you take my book metaphor, you can look at the sentences in that book and imagine that they're copied over and over and over again. In some cases, whole paragraphs are copied over again. And this was the critical and complexity and the barrier that our team met. Now, I want to go ahead and really talk to the theme of this meeting so far. I want to talk about the how. How did we do this, and why couldn't this happen before? Well, I want to go ahead and say, it's been an exciting era since the release of the Human Genome Project. We have seen growth in technology and innovation like we've never seen before. The Human Genome Project, as you rightfully said, was 20 research groups, multiple billions of dollars of investment, and it took over a decade. Now, there are studies that demonstrate that you can sequence a human genome in about 5 hours. What I'm showing you is a prop, a fun one, but it's a handheld device where we can now sequence 420 bases a second. I can plug this into my laptop, and it costs about $1,000. This type of technology, a lot of it was pioneered at University of California in Santa Cruz, where I'm based, is really important because not only can we generate sequences, but they're long sequences. Before, we were looking at about 100 ATCGs, 1,000 ATCGs. Now we're looking at routinely seeing hundreds of thousands of these stretches of DNA. And that is critical information for you to know, because it's the technology of today that allowed our team, this international group of researchers, to come together and apply methods to actually complete a human genome.
And
Stunning.
do you believe, explain to the audience here how this can be a benefit to people all over the world, even in the poorest places. Because we don't want this to be just one more thing where rich people have the corner on health care. And I know it's not, but you explain to them how this would happen.
Right, so if I can go ahead and jump a little bit, I think that the Human Genome Project had deficiencies in the fact that we need more than just one genome, and we need more than one genome that's of European ancestry. And so it's a really exciting time right now because I'm actually helping to direct the Human Pangenome Project, where we're trying to reach hundreds of these human genome projects that represent diversity around the world, and we're trying to use technology of today to build a resource that serves humanity tomorrow. And so the passion here is not only building a map that kind of can serve humanity better, but also challenging this audience to think about how researchers around this world can read genomes, can utilize genomes, and can begin to enter into the world not in an imbalanced way, but in a balanced way, to make use of precision genomics going forward. I would argue that reading a genome, this shared language that we all have, that we have a really hard time communicating around the world just because of funding imbalance. And I think that the technology is there now. It needs to not be considered a US technology or a particular school's technology. It needs to be global technology. Everyone should have access to this. And I also feel strongly that access to genomic information, as well as the promise of genomic medicine, should be viewed as a fundamental human right. And we have a moment right now to kind of step up and bring this forward. We see sequencing projects are happening all around us. We also know when we're celebrating COVID being brought on the scene that we can organize a global community. We can mobilize and start to sequence. And we can prepare, as I think another theme of this meeting, a new, younger workforce that has the skills necessary to bring it. It really will take a moment now of folks acting collectively to make this happen. Otherwise, this imbalance, this challenge with inequity in healthcare will be persistent for decades to come.
You know, I'm going to resist the temptation to say what I was thinking. Just because I always think about what are we supposed to learn from science about ourselves and how society should be organized. And basically, most of these studies show that we're about 99.5% the same. Every non-age-related difference you can see here is lodged in a tiny percentage of our genome. And we all spend 99.5% of our time thinking about the 0.5% that's different. Not just the uber-nationalists, everybody. If I could sing like Bono, I'd gone in a different line of work. You know, that sort of stuff. And it should be humbling to us, as well as incredibly empowering, that these mysteries are being unlocked. And we all should become dedicated to an inclusive approach to biomedical research and its benefits being properly distributed. Dr. Tedros, if you've been at this WHO job a good while now, if you could do 3 things tomorrow that would be your lasting legacy, and you were a total dictator of health outcomes, what would you do what 3 things would you do to try to make the world's health better, the future better?
That's a tough call, huh? That's a tough call. I think I would do something practical, by the way. I would suggest this pandemic has been unprecedented, and the whole world has been really sick and tired. But at the same time, the most important thing is, have we really learned our lessons? That's very crucial. And if we have learned our lessons from the mistakes that we have made, because the whole world was unprepared when this pandemic hit, then we implement the lessons that we have learned in order to prevent the next one. So one priority, which we call generational agreement, is to have a pandemic accord or compact or agreement that really will make the whole world or all countries to have obligation to do something to prepare now before the next pandemic hits, and if the next one comes, to early detect and manage it as early as possible. So, I mean, to all the audience, maybe one request I have is exactly that. There is already negotiation now between member states, and we need to have a pandemic accord, agreement, or whatever you call it, compact, a legally binding agreement, to really address the challenge that we have faced. It could be equity, it could be sharing of information, it could be other things that we have already learned. That's one. The second is, I think everybody now understands the centrality of health. When health failed because of COVID, our economy was affected. Many countries faced political upheaval, and it had impact socially. It affected almost everything, and it took us hostage. So this, I mean, the best lesson here is to understand that health is central, and it's not a cost, it's an investment, and it's a fundamental human right, an end in itself, but at the same time, a means to development. So each and every country has to invest in health, and really honestly. And that's what I would like to see, and especially focused on primary health care, which we have done together. Primary health care is important to promote health, to prevent disease, but at the same time, primary health care is important for emergency preparedness and response. And in this pandemic, we have seen that even the most developed countries have lots of surprises and saw for themselves that they were not prepared because there was really low investment in primary health care. So that's the second, investment in health focused on primary health care. So these are the two issues, but one last thing I would like to say is focusing on promotion of health is very important. Leading a healthy lifestyle. Managing disease is not the answer. It's promotion and prevention. And all we do, whether it's primary health care or through other things, even gene, is to keep people healthy, and that promotes health and prevents disease. So maybe these are the two, among other things, but I would like to use this opportunity to also support the replenishment of the Global Fund. The Global Fund has contributed a lot since its existence, and I hope donors will fulfill their obligations by replenishing the 18 billion requested by the Global Fund. Thank you.
What do you think, Dr. Miga, what do you think will likely be the most life-changing benefit of the sequencing of the genome and all that comes out of it?
I think that my enthusiasm is not on one silver bullet or one, amazing breakthrough. It's about a fundamental shift that I hope that we'll have in the future to create more equitable genomic resources and sharing, period. I think that will cause a ripple through all of the countries around the world where we'll start to make, once again, these massive scientific discoveries in many different directions instead of just aiming at one. And I do recognize that there was an international human genome project. However, there was an imbalance. The countries that could participate could afford to participate, and that imbalance is still present. And so I would hope, my vision of the future is that we can start working toward diminishing that barrier and diminishing that imbalance and creating a structure to where we can begin to partner outside of the United States, not for just accepting materials and not for just going one direction, but actually building capacity, building infrastructure, beginning to train and expand genomic tools and technologies so that they are very much in position to take advantage of the new era where we can benefit from genomic resources as everyone else. We've already seen this working and being useful for AIDS. We've seen this being useful for studying COVID and various diseases. And I think by having this type of infrastructure and support, which we lack now, could be a new legacy for the future of our children to come.
If he had had a different life, Bono might have been the world's first Secretary of State to represent us to other planets. He actually convinced Jesse Helms, who was a very right-wing chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, that we ought to forgive the debts of the poorest countries in the world on the millennium. And my Treasury Secretary at the time, Larry Summers, was not a cultural cutting-edge guy, and he says, some guy in jeans, a white T-shirt, and big sunglasses came to see me. His name was Bono. And he said, I never met anybody like him before, but he's smart as hell. So if you could do one thing today, what would you do? You get to wrap up. You get the last word.
I have to say, I told something, it's the end of the day, I might be allowed, people are going to go and have a drink, but I was talking to Dr. Miga I was at a wedding, and I had probably overserved myself at somebody, very clever people's wedding, and I was, the next day, I was sitting there, a bit of a head on me, and there's a fellow there with a computer, and we're making small talk, and he said, "How you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I didn't. How'd you sleep?" I said, "Dreams." I said, "Yeah, funny dreams." He said, "What did you dream of?" And I said, "You know, I don't chased through the forest by a bear or some really obvious, boring dream." And I said, "What about you?" And he said, I was dreaming about a machine that would convert carbon back into energy." And I really wished I hadn't told him the dream. I asked him his name, and he said, "My name is Craig Venter, and I worked on the Genome Project." And he said, "The whole world is going to change." I said, "Just please don't tell anyone that I had that dream, because I also have interesting dreams." You know, it's one of those. I would say that, yeah, there's something going on in the world where it's not just democracy, it's not just America. Its freedom is, in a way, in the crosshairs. And we have to demonstrate what freedom can do and what democracy can do. And the Global Fund is a kind of referendum to me, the replenishment. You know, this is the how are we going to raise the funds? Saved 20 million lives so far. Halved the rates of HIV/AIDS between PEPFAR and the Global Fund in the last 20 years. It's amazing progress, but we have to finish it out. We have to show what freedom can do, what democracy can do, and I think tomorrow is kind of a referendum on who we are, and at a time in the world when people are not sure who we are, and so I'm praying for the right outcome on that specific thing, funding for TB, AIDS, and malaria. And I know your research will have huge impact on fighting disease. This man has led the world fighting this pandemic. I came across him years and years ago in Ethiopia, where I began my life as a pain in the arse activist. And I was looking, I met Tedros backstage, and I said, "Where's all the arrows that's supposed to be in your back?" Because he's taken a lot of incoming, and you look great, and you're amazing. And you, sir, it's just so great to see you there, and your gutsy women around you. So, thank you.
Let's give them a big hand. They were great. Thank you.
Please welcome Randy Weingarten.
So I was so happy to hear that panel from backstage and happy to be here. We live in fraught times. A global pandemic, existential crisis, climate crises, rising authoritarianism that threatens democracy and freedom, both in the United States and abroad. And we're all here, not just because we adore the Clinton family, but we're here because turning this around requires taking action together, which is exactly what President Clinton is urging us to do. The AFT, my union, certainly feels that urgency, and we have made many commitments to action on this CGI stage, from aid for children-like preventative health screening to using union members' pension funds to rebuild America, like that new and improved LaGuardia Airport, where our pension funds were the base investment. So as CGI wraps up today, I want to make what I hope are change-making commitments to move our children, our communities, and our country forward. Now, there are 50 million students in America in 100,000 schools, so there's no magic wands here. But based upon what we know about kids and about hope, we are focused on 4 strategies to help children in an interconnected way: reading and literacy, career and technical pathways for high school students, expanding community schools with wraparound services, and bringing educators and families together. And yes, it does take a village. So educators didn't need to see declines in test scores to know what to do right now. Focus like a laser on helping our kids recover and thrive. Teach them core skills. Teach them knowledge. Teach them to critically think. Teach them empathy, focusing on the essentials. So one essential is reconnecting after the disruptions and trauma during the pandemic. School staffs are often the first responders to this silent pandemic in our country, the mental health pandemic. So many young people are suffering from anxiety, depression, loneliness, and grief. So that's where the Confetti Project at Buckeye Junior High School in Medina, Ohio, comes in. Jody Keith, a language arts teacher and AFT member, started the Confetti Project, which pairs 8th grade students with school employees or community members, and the student chooses a book that speaks to that student, and then the student and the teacher or bus driver or other educator or community member read it together and discuss it. The theme last year was inspirational reading, from books on topics from anxiety to grieving, from motivation to faith. And I wish you could all have heard these kids talk about what that program means to them. And if you want to, we got a whole video on it. But one described how reading Mitch Albom's Tuesdays with Morrie helped her after she lost a close family member. And another student confided to me, she was just not a reader, and said the Confetti Project turned her into someone who now actually wants to go to school. I think about it as Reading Plus, reading, recovery, reconnection, and relationships. So the AFT is giving them a grant to expand the program so younger kids can be book buddies with older kids, and they can then take on the program to senior facilities. So we know how important it is for educators, families, and communities to work together, so we launched the AFT Powerful Partnerships Institute to focus on this work. So reading, and then partnerships with parents. In LA, parents and teachers are coming together to build more family services into community schools. In Texas and Florida, AFT members and parents are fighting to protect the rights of LGBTQIA+ students. In New Hampshire, we're fighting to take on and be able to teach honest history. Across the country, parents and teachers are joining together to demand common sense gun laws. And on a global stage, we worked with NGOs to send teachers to Poland to help Ukrainian students in camp this summer. So to support these collaborations, the AFT is giving 30 AFT locals grants this year totaling $1.5 million. It's about what President Clinton calls creating a culture of possibility in a world hungry for hope. We're creating, you see all these pictures of us reading books. We're creating a culture of possibility through AFT Reading Opens the World. As others are trying to ban books, we're giving out beautifully diverse books to kids and their families across the country. And for many kids, this is the first time they've seen characters who look like them in books that are theirs to keep. So we've given out 750, you did wonder why I was up here. We've given out 750,000 of the 1 million books we committed to do last December. But kids, families, and educators love this, so the AFT has just committed to double the number of books we're going to give out to 2 million books. Rebuilding connection also means making schools the centers of community, like community schools with wraparound services to help children and families get health care, food, assistance, and the other essentials in one place, their neighborhood public schools. So the AFT, which already, our affiliates already commit to and do 700 community schools nationwide, our goal is to expand that to 2,500 over the next 5 years. So you can see we're putting our money where our mouth is. And these are big investments for us, but our members believe in these. We would love, obviously, to have anybody's help in this room or any organization that wants to partner with us or with our soon-to-be new and growing Pathways CTE program. The AFT is proud to be part of the Clinton Global Initiative. We're proud to be here again and delighted that we're all here together because we are in this race between hope and fear, between decency and cruelty, between the survival of our democracy and the rise of autocracy. It's a moment for all of us. That's why I'm on this stage, to fight for a better life for all, especially our young people and those on the margins, and taking action together, because together we can accomplish things that would be impossible on our own. Thank you very much.
If we want to win the future, we also have to win the race to educate our kids.
In 2011, President Obama called for 100,000 new science and math teachers to be trained across America within 10 years.
Become a teacher. Your country needs you.
At the Clinton Global Initiative meeting, 100K and 10 answered the call.
28 organizations couldn't hit that goal alone, but we could start. And over the next 10 years, hundreds of organizations joined us.
This one-of-a-kind partnership helped 100K and 10 not just to meet, but to exceed their goal.
That's like trying to get a moonshot and winding up on Mars. That's incredible an achievement.
And now 100K and 10 is stepping up to take on a new challenge. This partnership will push beyond.
This decade, we are committing to preparing and retaining 150,000 excellent STEM teachers.
Working together to build at scale, Beyond 100K commits to lifting up our nation's educators, to rebuilding and retaining a workforce that reflects the true vibrancy of our country. Beyond 100K will focus specifically on Black, Latino, and Native communities of teachers and students and schools with the greatest teacher shortages, working to cultivate classrooms and workplaces of belonging for teachers, students, and communities alike.
This next goal, this next decade, it's a story full of promise.
We need our children, all our children, to have the skills necessary to create a future that we can all be proud to share. It may sound like an impossible goal, but we can learn from this community of educators. And only together can we accomplish beyond what we dreamed possible.
Please welcome Chelsea Clinton, Vice Chair, Clinton Foundation.
Goodness, I appreciated the extra enthusiasm because I had an awkwardly long walk across stage. I am particularly thrilled to invite the following to the stage for a group of really exciting, dynamic, and important commitments that relate to education. So could we please invite Harry Lee from Abarso Network to stage. Oh, good, okay. I didn't know where you were coming from. I didn't know if you also were awkwardly walking across the stage. Ramji Raghavan from Augustaya International Foundation. My dear friend, Lydia Bossere from 8B Finance. And Maria Bolinska from the US-UK Fulbright Commission. We know that there is an indisputable link between access to creative and meaningful learning opportunities for children and young people, and then the ability to achieve and sustain better economic outcomes throughout their lives. And yet, despite what we all know to be true, cultural, financial, social, and normative barriers in many places have created large gaps in access to education for students around the world. And this, like so much, has only been further exacerbated throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. And solving these challenges requires collaboration and innovative thinking, and of course, investing in what we do know works. And it's imperative that we engage in this work to support, to foster, and to help the next generation of leaders discover themselves and ultimately help all of us. And so 4 very exciting new commitments to help us do just that. In India, Augustaya will work to scale and expand its science education programming, which already reaches 17 million. Some gasps? Yeah, okay, thank you. This is participatory. 17 million students a year, and they now are committing to reach an additional 20 million students over the next 5 years. They will do this through working with experiential learning programs in schools, engaging in programs at science fairs, deploying mobile units to help teach science, and so much else. They will work in urban areas as well as build an online platform to host games and other learning activities to help reach students in hard-to-reach places and also to complement their in-person activities. My friend Lydia, I'm very biased unapologetically toward my friends, admittedly, will continue to work across Africa to identify future leaders and innovators in high-growth fields and offer, importantly, financial and other supportive resources to students. She will, and her team, help those students find the right university programs and internship and research programs to help them pursue their dreams, ensuring that they have the financial and other resources to succeed in school and beyond. Abarso Network will address educational challenges and female unemployment in Somaliland through the development of 5 new private not-for-profit K-12 schools that will focus on academics as well as developing the social, emotional, and leadership skills that every child needs to thrive. The schools will be led by Abarso graduates, and they will prioritize hiring women teachers and ensuring that girls both start and finish their program. And finally, the US-UK Fulbright Commission will pair university instructors from the United States and England who are teaching courses that focus on addressing a shared global challenge and offer financial support to create sustained vital exchanges between those respective classes. I hope that you will give each of them and all of them a very big and enthusiastic round of applause. we all have to come this way to do a picture. And now it is with enormous pleasure and excitement that I would like to welcome to the stage Vanderbilt University Chancellor Daniel Diermeier. I normally am quite good at keeping secrets, but this has been a very, very hard one for me to hold in my heart. We are so proud and excited to announce here that CGI University will be coming back in person next year in 2023 at Vanderbilt University. I want to thank our extraordinary CGIU team, Regina and everyone at the Clinton Foundation who has worked tirelessly over the last few years to ensure that we had robust and engaging programming, ongoing mentorship, and leadership training for our CGIU students. We had our virtual event with hundreds of students earlier in the spring, and then I've had 20 more virtual CGIU events in the intervening months. And yet, as we all have experienced here together over the last couple of days, there is no substitute to gathering in person, to having the energy and the enthusiasm, the serendipity, to facilitate the catalytic explosion of ideas and innovations and commitments. And we know that our CGI students, who I think you heard, because they were particularly and understandably maybe a little bit louder than the rest of us, are such an extraordinary group, innovating ways to improve life and experiences on their college campuses, in our communities, in their and our countries, and certainly in our global world. And I just want to now read my notes so I can mention a few that have emerged from Vanderbilt. So truly just a few of the previous CGIU student commitments from Vanderbilt. One, a network of community kitchens, new community kitchens that have served and continue to serve new immigrant, refugee, and asylum seekers in Nashville. Two, SMS platform that has and continues to provide immunization appointment alerts for individuals living in Palestinian refugee camps. And three, a screen printing social enterprise that provides employment opportunities for people who were previously incarcerated. So just a few of the extraordinary ideas that have emerged from the extraordinary Vanderbilt students who we have been so fortunate to have as part of our CGI University community. Next year also will be Vanderbilt's 150th anniversary, and so we are so proud to be able to share this moment with our CGIU community and with Vanderbilt. And so I want to offer the Chancellor a chance to say a few words. Thank you all so much. Getting my notes out of your way.
Well, thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here with you this evening, and we are very honored to be part of this phenomenal, wonderful initiative. As you've heard, we've been part of that through our students over the years. And it is a particular honor to be selected as the location for CGIU during our sesquicentennial. We're delighted to be host for all the wonderful young leaders that will come to Nashville, and we look very much forward to being able to be together in person and do the great and important work that so urgently needs to be done. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, hello. 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 So this is Danelle. He was not introduced. And I think instead of me introducing you, Danelle, maybe you can share your story with CGIU and what your company, Block Power, does as a place to start.
Great. It's good to see you. So I'm Danelle Baird. I work at Block Power, where we turn buildings into Teslas. And what we mean by that is we rip all the fossil fuel heating and cooling and cooking equipment that uses fossil fuels and burns it and pollutes our homes. We rip it out and replace it with all electric, clean energy, healthy systems that are modern and smart. And I got interested in this because we heated our home growing up with our oven. We didn't have a functioning heating system in Brooklyn.
Danelle, share where you're from.
Oh, Brooklyn.
Right here
Brooklyn!
in New York City.
Brooklyn in the house. Okay, CGI. And so we didn't have a functioning heating system. So when it got cold in Brooklyn in the winters, we would heat our apartment with our oven, which wasn't unusual for a low-income family in Brooklyn. And so early on, I got really interested and focused on the need to have healthy, properly maintained energy and heating systems in homes. And as I got older and learned about climate change, just kind of knew that would be where I should focus. So fast forward to CGIU in 2013. I flew to Miami and met with 1,000 other CGIU students, brilliant folks who were figuring out how to re-engineer solar panels with nanotechnology. They were just doing amazing things, and I got inspired to make a commitment that we were going to figure out how to green 1,000 low-income buildings like the buildings where I grew up. And it took us a while, but we focused on completing that commitment, and a few years ago, we're really happy to celebrate greening our 1,000th building, which was in Brooklyn.
And Danelle, can you share what have you been up to since that 1,000th building?
What we learned is that when you green one building, it's actually connected to a bunch of other buildings on that block. Neighbors get curious, they get excited. They want to learn about reducing their energy costs. They want to learn about keeping their families healthier in their home. They want to learn about how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in their footprint. And so we actually learned that if you green one building in Brooklyn, you actually can end up greening a whole city block in Brooklyn. And if you can green a whole city block in Brooklyn, you actually can green a whole neighborhood. So the question now is, given the climate crisis, if you can green a whole neighborhood, why can't you green a whole city? And so what we're doing is we're signing up cities to go green in the next 5 to 7 years. We have the first 3 cities in the world that are committed to fully decarbonizing 100% of their buildings. We're going to send young people from low-income backgrounds who are trained and employed to do green energy upgrades in buildings. We're going to send them building to building and reduce greenhouse gas emissions from every single building in the city of Ithaca, New York, in the city of Menlo Park, California, and our new announcement is the city of San Jose, which is one of the biggest cities in the world.
Danelle, for people who may not know, could you just share why decarbonizing buildings, greening buildings, is such a critical part of combating the climate crisis, especially with older buildings, including in places like here in New York?
Yeah. So since going through CGIU, I've become a parent. We actually have a 5-month-old and a 7-year-old. And mostly my wife's work. And
I'll tell her you said that.
And it just really drilled home, by the time my kids are my age, what kind of world are they really going to inherit? And it turns out that buildings produce 30% of US greenhouse gas emissions. So there just isn't any path to really addressing and mitigating the worst impacts of climate change without figuring out how to green all 125 million buildings across America. We got to figure it out. And I think there's a lot of good that's going to come from that. One, I think we all learned from Senator Manchin what happens if we don't focus and prioritize low-income and working-class communities as part of the clean energy revolution. Clean energy has to be for everybody, or else it's just not going to work. And so by making commitments to green all of the buildings, we can use existing off-the-shelf technology to really decarbonize up to 30% of our emissions, and that makes me hopeful for my kids and your kids and everybody else.
And can you talk about kind of what it means to decarbonize a building, and how long does that take? If people here are curious, what questions should they ask you if they find you after our conversation today, including like, how do I know how long it'll take me to decarbonize the office building where I work, or my apartment complex, or the school where my kids go?
Well, one of the things we're doing, I think I learned so much from the panel on the human genome. If you think about how important it is to map the human genome, that's what we want to do for all the buildings in America. So we have a project that Jeff Bezos is funding as a part of our new commitment here at CGI. We are building digital models of every single building in America that will allow...
Every single building?
Yeah, every one.
All 125 million of them?
Yeah, we're going to build digital models.
Everywhere that we live and work and go to school or hang out?
Well, we're going to have to green all the buildings. So we need to map all of the buildings.
I just wanted that to be fully appreciated. Yeah.
So Mr. Bezos has given us a grant to aggregate all of the data on every single building in America, and we're providing a free sustainability score and a free sustainability plan to every single building owner in America. And so you can actually go to blockpower.io and type in your building's address that you're curious about. You can ask 4 or 5 questions, and then we'll give you a score and a plan for how to decarbonize your home. We'll try to introduce you to local contractors who can help you. If you need financing, we'll provide that. And really work with you to figure out how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and energy costs in your home.
Amazing. Danelle, in the last few seconds we have, since we started the conversation anchored in CGIU, and I know that universities are part of this commitment too, could you just finish our conversation here today about the ways in which universities are included in the commitment and why it was so important to you that universities be included?
As a university student at Columbia getting my MBA, I was privileged to be mentored and supported by the CGIU community, and was able to green 1,000 buildings. Some of them are apartment buildings, so we ended up working with 5,000 families to green their homes. We want to scale that up, and so we're challenging 10 universities across America, including Vanderbilt. I was working the president over backstage.
Real-time problem solving at CGI.
We're going to challenge 10 universities to each commit to decarbonizing and greening 1,000 low-income buildings in their local communities, and we hope that the students will be inspired by the commitment to participate in reducing greenhouse gas emissions locally in their city, outside the walls of their campus, and that they're going to share the data with university students around the world so that we can all recommit ourselves to the challenge of decarbonizing all the buildings all over the world.
And we should all help. Danelle, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Please welcome to the stage Lin-Manuel Miranda and Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Oh, thank you. Actually, this isn't, I'm auditioning for whatever his next magnum opus is. Well, you all know who our wonderful guest is, and I also want to call out his father, Luis Miranda, who is somewhere here in the audience, who is a long time friend of mine. So, my dear, 5 years ago today, Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico. Now it has been hit again with Hurricane Fiona. I know from my own personal work and what the foundation has done with you, your family, and your own foundation, how dedicated you all have been to trying to help Puerto Rico not just recover, but really come back stronger and better. How's it going? What's happening?
Yeah, I would have had a different answer for you last week than I do this week, to be perfectly honest. We were on the island last week, and we were celebrating the gains that we've made. You know, the coffee industry was wiped out by Hurricane Maria. We created this consortium that I call the Coffee Avengers of organizations, you know, corporations like Nespresso and Starbucks, but also non-for-profits like TechnoServe, who work with independent farmers all over the world to share best practices. And I'm happy to report coffee was at pre-Maria levels of productivity as a result of that work and that partnership. We did a partnership with Google Arts and Culture. We found one of the only silver linings of the pandemic, which was at first we were partnering with one museum to digitize their art for the Google Arts and Culture webpage to sort of, you know, show Puerto Rico's art to the world. There are incredible works of art in Puerto Rico that the world doesn't get to see. And because of the pandemic, that camera stayed in Puerto Rico. So we just said, keep digitizing. Don't send the camera back. That grew into something that it's their largest project ever. It's 10 museums. If you go to Google Arts and Culture, you can see, it's called Puerto Rico, the Sum of Its Arts, and it's just tremendous, the work that we've made. We've really been in our lane of helping artists and arts organizations that often get left behind when you're dealing with recovery efforts. I think Puerto Rico it's a small island, but it contributes so much music and art and culture to the world. I mean, between just me and Bad Bunny, that's just 2 Puerto Rican dudes. That's it. And that's like the 2 longest selling albums of the year. So like, that's just 2 dudes this year. So think about Rita Moreno and think about Jennifer Lopez and think about how much Puerto Rico has given you. And then, you know, Hurricane Fiona made landfall. The one grace note has been we have been able to maintain communication with the island this time. That was not the case during Maria. I have been texting my cousins and my aunts and uncles hourly. You know, most of the island is without power. All of the island is without water. So I know we're in like commitment mode here at CGI. I'm going to give you my father's email address.
And he's serious. Write it down.
This is his real email address. It is luis@lingmanuel.com. We are looking for partners because we have to start recovery. The goal is to build, we're never going to stop hurricanes, and climate change, of course, I'm sure you've heard about in many different panels today, is not going away anytime soon, but we can build a more resilient Puerto Rico, and we need your help to do that. So please email my dad.
That's right. Email
Luis@lingmanuel.com. Join us.
And I can speak from experience that when we were down in Puerto Rico before the pandemic, and seeing the work that you were doing and hearing the stories about how people were going to build back better, it was incredibly inspirational. But then we've kept up with it, with you and your dad and Whitney Williams and others who have been working with you, and it was so exciting. So we can't get discouraged, and I think the last point you made is incredibly important. We're going to have to adapt to all of these weather events that, yes, they've happened over the millennia, but they are worse and they are more frequent because of climate change. So that means we have to change systems and structures, and we have to do more to make sure that the water system and the electricity and the lights and all the rest of it are on. And I know that your focus is to try to bring people together to do just that.
Yes, that's exactly right. One of the sort of another example of resiliency in the face of these sort of natural disasters is we helped pay for solar panels for this hospital in Orocovis. It's in the mountains of central Puerto Rico. It was the only hospital that remained fully operational when Fiona made landfall. So it is possible. It is possible to adapt to what's coming, and our focus is really on that in the coming months and years, and we're not going anywhere.
And I saw some of your partners in action, and anyone here who wants to partner with an extraordinary group, do email his father. You mentioned that one of your principal reasons for the work you've done in Puerto Rico is to lift up the arts and culture and to tell that story to the world. When you think about the arts and culture right now, not only in Puerto Rico, but in the United States and elsewhere, what more could the arts and culture be doing to help us understand the time in which we find ourselves with all of the stresses, wars and conflicts and refugee flows and threats to democracy? What can the arts and culture help us understand?
Well, first of all, imagine your pandemic without the arts.
Good question.
Imagine being at home with your family and not being able to escape with a television show or a book or a piece of music, or get out of your house with your mask on and your headphones on. Imagine our life without the arts. So I think first and foremost, the arts, our responsibility as artists is to meet the moment. That is both true in terms of the moment in the world we find ourselves in, but also like literally moment to moment. When I am writing a character in a musical, my job is to feel how that character feels, and when it feels true, write it down. It's the same impulse, it's just in a different mode. My summer reading this summer, Hillary, I've been reading the letters of Oscar Hammerstein. I like big books, I guess. But what's so extraordinary is in between the letters of back and forth with Jerome Kern on what should happen in Act 2 of Showboat, or writing with Dick Rogers, how are we going to get the rights to this book so we can turn it into South Pacific, are letters to the president of the NAACP, and what is our next event, and letters to the Wartime Board, in how can we continue to enlist America's help and engage America in World War II. And those are side by side. They are not mutually exclusive. You have to meet the moment as an artist, and you also have to meet the world where it is.
Oh, I love that. That's exactly how I think a real artist views his or her role. And as we conclude this conversation, Lin-Manuel, this is an audience of doers, change makers, people who want to make a difference. You've already enlisted them to help your father in Puerto Rico. How do you think of what we can be doing together? We're not all artists, and we don't have that ability and talent, but part of what CGI does is try to convince people we can each do something and make a real difference.
Yeah, I believe that the artistic impulse and the philanthropic impulse are the same. It's the thing that keeps you up at night. It's the thing that doesn't let you go because you've read it or you've heard it and you can't unhear it. For me, that can be anything from some song that doesn't exist but should exist, but it can also be an injustice that you've read about and go, I can put my shoulder into this, and I can make a real difference if I do it, whether that is amplifying or raising money or volunteering. So you are going to see a lot of opportunities on the stage. What is the one that keeps you up tonight? That's what you should go back to in the morning. It requires such commitment that you're going to need that to sustain you, because that also comes from a place of love. That thing that keeps you up at night is eventually going to be a labor of love, whether it is a musical or whether it is a cause or an injustice that needs your help.
We could not end on a better note than that. Think about your commitments, what you've already been doing, what you've committed to doing because of CGI, what you'll think about doing in the future, as truly that labor of love. And you've given us so much love and so much art, and we're all so grateful for that. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
going back to first principles, looking forward, looking to the future. Somebody needs to show up and make something good happen. And that's what we're trying to do.
The model of partnership and commitment to action has proven ability to achieve measurable, sustainable results.
When you do it with the locals and you empower the locals very much, nothing can stop you.
Country-led, country-owned action is critical.
When we think about a just and equitable energy transition, we can't think of one half of the world and leave out the developing countries.
We must choose to be accountable to our global community.
More and more people realize that climate risk is investment risk.
We will not back down on this agenda, and we have to level out the playing field, and we have to give people an opportunity to make a difference.
Every commitment in health equity will be made under the aegis of the Dr. Paul Farmer Health Equity Commitment to Action platform.
We have a lot of work to do, and we have to do that for a better survival of the children of tomorrow.
But I am really hopeful of the new generation now.
Humanity cannot be applied selectively.
Hope requires action.
What brings me hope for sure is that CGI is back.
And if we come together, we can come up with solutions.
We share same values that we love, freedom and democracy.
Today I'd like to make a commitment.
Our commitment today, this 5-year commitment.
So my question to you is, how will you give power to the people?
Thank you very much. I will be brief. We have come to the end of 2 wonderful days. But I want to begin by thanking all of our sponsors. We couldn't be here without them, and I want all of you to know this. When we started this idea of doing this year, I was just as nervous as I was 15 years ago. I had no idea whether this would work or not. Hillary and I were having dinner when New York reopened after the pandemic, but we were eating on the street, and these 2 total strangers go by and say, "When are you going to start CGI again?" And, you know, I don't want to be like when I was a boy, Chet Hutley was a big newscaster, and he got ill and went home to Montana to live out his days. And on his last episode, they said, "What have you learned about politics?" He said, "I have learned that every person who ever wins any election thinks somehow lightning will strike and they'll be president. So I didn't want to think lightning would strike again." But I had to start thinking about this, and I realized people were so hungry to have something good to think about and good to work on and good to make a difference about. So thank you to the sponsors, because if it hadn't been for the sponsors, we would not have been able to lower the admission ticket as much as we did, and we wouldn't have been able to spend so much money to pay the transportation costs of all the young NGO leaders from all over the world who never could have come to New York on their own and do this, and have made the contributions they've made here. And I hope those of you who met them and liked them will find ways to help them. I want to thank the volunteers. I've looked out in the crowd and seen some who were always here for CGI, and I never dreamed we'd get people just show up on the drop of a moment and do what had to be done. I want to thank Kevin Thurman and all the folks at the Clinton Foundation and my old friend Greg Hale, whom I've known since he was a little boy, and his team at the Markham Group. But we owe a special word of thanks to Greg Milne and Luke Shield, because I believed in it, but they had to live it. And I hope they get some sleep now. And I owe an enormous amount of thanks to Hillary and Chelsea for carrying so much of the load here in the last 2 days and for 1,000 other things. I thank the people who've shared their voices, their experiences, whether on the stage, in our feature sessions, in the story studio, or just talking and passing to other folks who are here. I want to thank the commitment makers. Today, as a result of this meeting, and we finalized more than 140 new commitments, which, among other things, will create more than 1.5 million new jobs when fully funded and implemented. More than 12.8 million people will have access to primary care. More than 27,000 doctors and health workers will get training to improve primary health care services. More than 3.5 million tons of CO2 emissions will be eliminated. And you heard earlier all the commitments to help the people of Ukraine and those who have forced to leave Ukraine to go to other countries. I thank them for that. There are commitments here that will also support response and resilience in the Caribbean following the natural disasters generated by Hurricane Fiona. These commitments really do matter. In a way, they're why people come here, because they know that actions have to follow words. Each commitment actually helps address a problem or advance a goal. But perhaps even more important, everybody knows now, as we see played out almost as a tragic movie every day, watching events in Ukraine and elsewhere, that you have to model the kind of behavior that supports democracy, that argues for why freedom is better than bondage, that inclusion is better than division. We all say that, but most of us have been lucky enough that if we get walled off with our own, we'll still do okay. And we have to model what we say we believe. It will help us in ways we can't even imagine. You know, all this stuff the world's going through today, we all act like it's new. Oh, there's this new, breathtaking threat to American democracy or to democracy throughout the world. The truth is, this is a very old story. We all want to believe, you know, we were born in log cabins, we built ourselves, we discovered everything that's worth knowing. But it's an old story. Is the most important thing about life the ability to give gifts that empower other people, or the ability to dominate other people? The urge to control, to dominate, the inevitable race to have one set of rules govern you and your crowd and another set everybody else. It's playing out in Ukraine with the Uyghurs, with the Rohingya, in the rising tide of negative populism in various places in the world. But there is, I think, in the heart of most sensate people, what the scriptures in my faith call the still small voice. That when all the storms have gone, all the fires have gone, all the earthquakes have gone, all the noise has been made, somehow we know better. And there is always a still small voice whispering to us, that we should model, live, and create an alternative future where what we have in common is more important than our interesting differences. As you heard from our brilliant young scientists here, getting the differences right is important. There may be millions of lives at stake in getting the differences right. But in the end, most of us are not scientists. We have to know what the big picture is, and the big picture is that somehow, miraculously, we're all 99.5% the same. I like to joke that Hillary got really interested in archaeology when we were living in the White House. And in one of these magazines, she read many years later that we share 2 to 4% of our genome with the Neanderthals, who occupied Europe for about 40,000 years before they went extinct after we showed up there. And it turned out the Neanderthals and the humans liked each other better than we knew. And so everybody who's not 100% descendant from some Saharan Africans, where people stood up on the East African savanna a couple 100,000 years ago, everybody else has some of their genome from Neanderthals. And we had a lot of fun with that. And she said, well, how can anybody be surprised that you're part Neanderthal? And I said, yeah, but you are too. And you are too is something we ought to all remember with gratitude, not embarrassment, with gratitude that we are on this little ship sailing along. In 2018, Hillary and I started the year by going to Hawaii. And we went to the Big Island, and it was our first opportunity to go up to the top of Mauna Kea, which is taller than Mount Everest. It's just that half of it's below the sea line, to all the great installations of telescopes there. And they're some of the biggest in the world, including the Keck telescopes. And we looked into one of them into the Andromeda Galaxy. And I was looking at the whole universe, trying to figure out what did all this mean. And then we went down, and where the vision for normal vision was greater, we went down and looked at the night sky, and at just 9,800 feet, you could see Andromeda, and instead of being the 3 stars like you teach your kids if you're looking at the elementary sky book, it looked like a worldwide wrestling championship belt with all the other stars around it that are totally invisible most places. So anyway, the team of the Keck telescopes, which is basically an American team, although the head then was a German, and they invited us after we got our tour, and we were freezing. It was 18 degrees up there and 88 at sea level, to go and have a cup of coffee and talk about all this. So we had a nice little talk, and I asked them questions, and Hillary asked them questions. And finally I said, do you guys ever talk about the likelihood of life on other planets? And they said, oh, all the time. And I said, is there a great deal of difference? He said, huge. I said, really? He said, huge, huge difference. I said, what is it? He said, there are those of us who think it's 85% likely and those who think it's 95% likely. But he said it is a huge difference because there are 1 billion galaxies in the universe, not planets, galaxies, and it's getting bigger all the time. I've thought about that a lot. And then you saw me drilling our brilliant scientist about the human genome thing. The smallest and biggest things can somehow reorient you when we saw the first picture of the first identified black hole in outer space, 55 million light years away, with big flaming fires around its edge, physicists was reported in the paper as saying, you know, if our whole solar system went by there close enough, it would immediately be sucked in and would fit in the ashes would fit in a thimble, a big thimble. And I thought, man, it may not be as important who's on Mount Rushmore anymore. I'm trying to get you all to think about all that you just did. Look, we're all just passing through here. And your life goes by in the flash of an eye. Some live long lives, some live short lives, some live in between lives. Some live drab lives with moments of joy, some live joyful lives with moments of heartbreak. There's all kinds of lives. All you get to do is to get up every day and decide what you're going to do and how you keep score. I see John Hope Bryan out there smiling at me. If he had wanted to, when he starting his own business when he was 14, he'd be worth a lot more money than he is today. Maybe 100 million more, maybe much, much more than that. He made a different decision, and he's a richer man because of it. All of us are like that. So that's what I want you to think about. I wanted to do this because I wanted people to start trying to make good things happen again. I wanted us to start looking for things we could agree with people who otherwise disagree with us on. If you begin with the end in mind, then the differences you have about other things don't make much difference because you have a people-centered view of the world and an outward-looking view and a caring view. If you begin with an identity that requires you to dominate instead of empower, in the end, it's going to be a dead end. So I think we're happier doing this. I think that's why you showed up. I think people get frustrated just reading every day about how bad everybody who disagrees with them are, and how terrible this, that, and the other thing is. Most people just want to get up and live the way they live the rest of their lives. Get the show on the road. Make something good happen. And so, anyway, that's what we try to do. Think we ought to do it next year? Good Lord willing, we'll all be there. God bless you, and thank you so much.